Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Geezerology Roundtable. This week, Bob and Dan up in Missouri and myself here in Florida are going to discuss the Doors album, Other Voices. This is their 7th studio album. It's been a pretty controversial one over the years, as we'll get into later, and as I'm sure that probably most of our listeners know. But this was released on October 18th, 1971, just a few weeks after Jim Morrison died. So this is the first Doors album that does not feature Jim Morrison. It was recorded as a trio by Ray Manzarek, Robbie Krieger, and John Densmore, and produced, as L.A. Woman was, by Bruce Botnick. So Bob's going to get us started to tell us what we need to know about the Doors' Other Voices. Bobby.
All right. Thank you, Scotty. So the Doors have wrapped up their L.A. Woman album. Jim Morrison heads off to Paris to take a break from the realities of life. And the 3 remaining Doors are in LA, and they're working up new material with the anticipation, that Jim Morrison's going to return and they'll start working on a new album. Unfortunately, Jim Morrison passes away in July, and the Doors are now facing a dilemma. What do they do without their charismatic, very popular lead singer? So do they pack it up and quit? Do they look for a new singer, or do they carry on their own? None of those choices are good. And if they look for a new singer, whoever they find is going to be compared to Jim Morrison. And I mean, I don't even know who would want to take on that role, because, you're doomed. If you come in and you try to emulate Morrison, everybody's going to accuse you of copying. If you do your own thing, they're going to compare you to Morrison and whatever. Faced with the dilemma of what to do, the Doors decided to carry on as a trio. They had the full support of their record company. So they took the material that they had been working up, waiting, for Jim Morrison to return, and they go into the studio. Keyboardist Ray Manzarek and guitarist Robbie Krieger decide that they're going to share lead vocal duties. Bad choice. They're not singers. There are a couple of times on here where maybe they sort of kind of pull it off, but this album is really plagued by weak vocals, and in some cases plagued by some really weak material. And I give the guys an A for effort for trying to carry on and whatever, but the album just doesn't work. And in some ways, it's almost embarrassing. There are a couple songs on here that I can't believe are Doors material. I'm horny, I'm stoned. I mean, what are we, Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show? And this song has Krieger doing lead vocals, and he's a fantastic guitarist and was a talented songwriter, but my God, he's not a singer. Variety is the spice of life. This is another embarrassing song. It's some lighthearted thing about cheating on your wife. I mean, come on, guys. You gave us some of the greatest rock music in the history of the world, and this is what you put out now. There are a few tunes on here that really had some promise. Tightrope Ride is probably the best track on this album. It's a straight ahead rocker. It sounds like something that could have come off the Morrison Hotel album. Manzarek does credible vocals on it. In the Eye of the Sun, another not bad tune. Down on the Farm, another embarrassment where Manzarek and Krieger, share lead vocal duties. And so like I say, the album's really plagued by some very weak vocals. And I also have an issue with the release of the album. This came out just 3 months after Morrison's death, and too soon, guys, too soon. And like I said earlier, in my opinion, they didn't have any good choices here. They did the best they could. They need to be commended for trying to carry on. The problem here is these are three extremely talented musicians, but they needed Jim Morrison, like I'm sure Jim Morrison needed them. They had a symbiotic relationship, and they fed off of each other, and Morrison brought out the best in these guys, and they brought out the best in him. And what's lacking here is the edginess that Morrison brought to what they did. And the songs are also lacking Morrison's poetry. And while Robbie Krieger was responsible, for some of the Doors' great songs when Morrison was still around, Morrison always seemed to be able to add a certain element to a lot of Krieger's lyrics that, gave them this little added oomph. And that's just not here now. So again, I commend them for carrying on. They gave it a good shot. Hindsight is always, very valuable. I think maybe they should have sat out for a while and really thought about finding a new vocalist and recreating themselves as something different than what they were with Morrison. So I have the album, and I have the follow-up album that they did, Full Circle. The reason I have them is because I'm a Doors fanatic, so they're in my collection just to be a completist. But quite honestly, I think that if I had never heard anything by the Doors and I just picked up this album, I would have listened to it and probably dismissed it and never came back to it. So as much as I hate to rag out the Doors, I really can't give this one much of a sterling endorsement. And again, I can give them an A for effort, but guys, you never should have come back with a follow-up after this one. But so anyway, that's my take on it.
Hey, how about you?
Well, thank you, Scott. Bob, you touched on every point, and probably 2 or 3 more than I was going to mention in another great overall summary of a record. But yeah, as a longtime Doors fan and Morrison guy, I think that, and I don't know if it was they were under anything contractual obligations. I thought, why so soon after LA Woman? It's true that, I read that they had songs, a few songs already worked up. They were rehearsing them in the studio, waiting for Morrison to return from Paris. And you can tell on a couple songs, like maybe Eye of the Sun, Ships with Sails is instrumentally, I really like it. It kind of has that little ethereal, mysterious thing going. Although it wasn't much, lyrically, but what there was pretty good. Yeah, the other, I think they just wanted to continue on. They felt like they were such a tightly knit group of musicians, and that Ray had sung before with them when they were on tour and Morrison wouldn't show up or he'd pass out on stage, and he had done some singing with previous bands, so it's not bad, and I think that's where a lot of these songs kind of fall. They're not bad, but they're not good either, with the exception of Ships with Sails, and Tightrope Ride is probably the most up-tempo rocker and I think Manzarek gives it the best effort he does on that, but there's just a lot of holes in this. Something Bob talked about was that even on Robbie Krieger's songwriting credits, Morrison always added a verse or two, which gave it that Doors edge, especially in Light My Fire. And in fact, the song Touch Me, which Robbie Krieger wrote originally, was called Hit Me. And Morrison said, no, I'm not going to have any song where we're hitting women or people. And so, yeah, Rob Krieger has written some good songs through the years, but they're just not on Other Voices album. I mean, I'm Horny, I'm Stoned. Yeah, I didn't know if they were trying to be funny or not, but in a follow-up LP to your main singer, your inspiration and best lyricist, I don't know what they were thinking, unless they were that lacking of material. But I think that's probably throughout this, the material is pretty light. There's some good stuff on here. I mean, obviously Manzarek and Krieger and a couple tunes here do show off their musicianship skills. And they brought in a couple of bass players that they used before, I think Ray Neapolitan, and then a percussionist. They were kind of pushing, try for a Latin feel, which I think was a Densmore was always kind of, he enjoyed Latin rhythms with his background and all that. But yeah, holy cow, this, I think this Other Voices is probably only true devoted Doors fans would include it in their collection. There's a couple good moments here, but the really memorable moments kind of get washed over in all the I'll say average to so-so moments. Yeah, and I don't know, down on the farm was they tried. I mean, Manzarek and Krieger, they really gave it their best effort. I do give them credit, but I don't know what the rush was to come out with this album so fast. Maybe they should have rethought it, but yeah, I mean, this is without Morrison. This is like they're still trying to drive the Doors car down the highway with only 3 tires.
Yeah, I also like Bob. I bought this album when it first came out. I bought Full Circle when it first came out, and I remember I enjoyed listening to these albums, this one and also Full Circle, and I enjoyed them and I listened to them over and over again. But I think that was probably more out of devotion to this band than it was that I really enjoyed the music, because you know, I hadn't listened to either of these in a long time. And I put on Other Voices. I started listening to it a week or two ago when we decided that we were going to do this piece. And it's, you know, and coming at it fairly fresh after many years off, and it's really obviously bad. It's not good at all. And I thought, to answer the question, my only thought of why they felt they had to do this so quick was just the capital. I mean, they had to. I think they probably felt that they had to get something out there before the Doors brand just kind of dissolved into the ether. You know, it was like, and I don't know this, but I don't remember that I've ever read this, but just trying to make sense of why they recorded and released this album so quickly after Morrison died, and it would had to have been because people were still buzzing about the news of fans were still buzzing about the Doors and about Jim Morrison dying, and they were in the news and they were on people's minds. So so it may have just been a real cynical reach for to get out there while the market is still hot. I mean, what other reason would they have to do this? I can't think of any reason. Bob says I have an A for effort. I'm not even going to give him an A for effort because I don't think there was a whole lot of effort here. It sounds to me, these songs sounds to me like they were just kind of ideas that they were just working out, and then they just decided to go ahead and record it and release it before they ever really gave much thought to how to finish these songs up, put finishing touches on them. It's like they're almost like these are demos, like early ideas of songs, because they're just so bad and so corny and so stupid. I'm horny, I'm stoned. Variety is a spice of life. It's just bad. This album did sell fairly well considering the circumstances. It reached number 31 on the Billboard 200, and that's pretty successful. It's that it's not as high. It didn't chart as high as the Jim Morrison albums did in their day, but still, if you're coming out with a product in 1971 with an album in a rock field and as crowded as the field was during those days, and if you get a number 31 album, that's a pretty good effort. In a vacuum, when you don't consider everything else in there. 31's pretty good. They put out 2 singles. The 2 singles they put out were Ships with Sails and Tightrope Ride. Neither one of them, they both got on the charts, but like in the 70s or 60s, neither one of them went very far. They probably, I did see an interview with Ray Manzarek recently where he discussed this, and and he, as Bob said, Manzarek said that they did consider going out and finding another lead singer, but they pretty much dismissed that idea pretty quickly, just because of the fact that no matter who they got, if they would have gone out and got Mick Jagger, then people wouldn't have really listened to Mick Jagger because they would have been trying to compare him to Jim Morrison, right, as a leader of the Doors, and so they decided right away that they just weren't going to put anybody in that position. Which I thought was probably a good idea, but probably a better idea would have been to me, and this is 2020 hindsight, obviously the better idea would have been just take this material and scrap it and just go ahead and dissolve the Doors and get on with the rest of your career, right? Because within a year or two after this, the Doors did dissolve after they released this album and also Full Circle about a year later. They dissolved, and Manzarek went on a solo career. I remember Manzarek recorded 2 that I remember. It might have been 3 solo albums before, he started doing other projects. And I think Densmore and Krieger put together another band called the Butts Band, and that recorded 1 or 2 albums. And neither Manzarek's solo career really got any legs. The Butts Band never got any legs, and so they just kind of all went out, and pretty much Manzarek and Densmore and Krieger just always became known as former members of the Doors. None of the 3 ever really did anything that had any impact after that, except just recycling Doors materials over and over and over and over and over again, and writing books and putting out archival albums and things like that, which to me speaks to how really vital Morrison was. I mean, you can kind of say, well, okay, these guys were all great musicians, and Manzarek was a great musician. Krieger was a pretty good songwriter apparently, and a pretty good guitar player. Densmore was a fantastic drummer, and they all had some talent, but the center of gravity was gone, and none of them ever could ever got their balance back. And they realized this too. I think they became embarrassed by this because it wasn't too long. Sometime in the 80s, these things, this album and Full Circle got pulled out of print, and these things became unavailable. Both these albums became unavailable for 25 or 30 years before they finally, and they ignored them. Whenever they would go talk about the Doors music and recycle the Doors music and do this and do that, it was like Other Voices and Full Circle never existed. It wasn't until well into the 90s before they did release these things on CD and actually started acknowledging that, yeah, these 2 albums existed. So I think the three guys were embarrassed by this thing, because they should have been, because it was bad. It was a bad decision. It was a bad decision to record this album. It wasn't a contractual thing, because their contract with Elektra Records did end after LA Woman. That fulfilled their contract, but then actually they huddled, because the three surviving Doors did kind of shop around a little bit, and couldn't find a record label to take them on. So they did kind of go back hat in hand to Elektra Records, and Jack Holzman said, "Yeah, we'll give you a shot." So they signed him to a two record contract, and that's how Other Voices and Full Circle came about. And then Elektra just kind of went into the archives and started releasing some compilation material. I know between Other Voices and Full Circle was a double album called Weird Scenes Inside the Gold Mine, which was a compilation album of all the Morrison songs, of all, not necessarily greatest hit album. There were some deep tracks on it too, to fill up a double album, and a couple of B-sides that never turned up on an album. But the non-Morrison tracks were ignored on any subsequent Doors compilations and box sets. I don't know if a box set has ever come out with these two albums or not, or tracks from these or not. And they did follow up, what it was, in 1978 with the American Prayer album, which was recordings of Morrison reciting poetry in a recording studio not long before he went to Paris. And then the Doors took those tapes and wrote and recorded some new instrumental music behind Morrison's poetry, and put out the album American Prayer, which I never did buy that one. I know Bob did, because the only reason I used to hear this album was because Bob had a copy of it when Bob and I were roomies back in the day. But that was pretty much the start, I thought, of the excessive, sort of I don't know, dependence and reliability, and the treasure chest of old Morrison material. Just keep recycling this stuff as long as we can make a living at it. That's really cynical, I know, but that's my take on it. I think from this point on, it's just from Other Voices on, and to start Other Voices on, it was just, these guys just made a career of recycling the Doors brand, and many lawsuits started happening, and some bad decisions started getting made. But anyway, yeah, this is not good. I would not recommend this to anybody. Even if you want to just study a bit of history and go back to listen to this, it's really cringeworthy. There's a lot of, it's really cringeworthy. Ships with Sails is an okay song. I can hear Ships with Sails as a Jim Morrison song. If Morrison was there, put a nice Morrison vocal on this song, and maybe just tweak the lyrics a little bit, tweak the vibe of it a little bit, this would have been a good Doors song. Tightrope Ride would have been a good Doors song. But some of that other stuff, it's like I could see Morris want to say, I'm not gonna sing this shit. Because it's bad and it's embarrassing. Yeah, okay, that's enough of that. Don't pay too much attention to this album. I would not go out of my way to go listen to it. It's easy enough to call it up on a streaming service. Go ahead and give it a listen. But it would be more like the thing where you just have to look at a car wreck when you're driving by, more than it would be an interesting listen. But yeah, that's our take. I think all three of us are in agreement on this one, that it was probably not a good decision, and I think the three guys came around to that idea not too long after that, because they buried this thing pretty quickly after it got out there. Any final thoughts on Other Voices?
Yeah, just real quickly. In his book that came out, I think last year, Robbie Krieger talked about this and the Full Circle album and all of that. And he says now that it was a mistake to have brought this album out as quickly as they did. And he said that that's the thing that they do regret, just 3 months after Morrison's death. He talks, about the decisions, whether to try it on their own or find another singer. And ultimately, they did decide that they needed to find a vocalist. So after the Full Circle album, the three of them go to London. And why London, I don't know, but they were looking for a vocalist there in London. And that's when Manzarek said, "I'm done." And he just went home and said, "No more." And that was the end of the Doors. And that then, as you said, Scott, Krieger and Dinsmore went on to found the Butts Band, and they did 2 albums there. And I have both of those. And right, so nothing that they did solo got them anywhere. And again, this is just my opinion, which, $5 at Starbucks will get you a cup of coffee, along with my opinion. I think they should have taken a hiatus and seriously looked for a vocalist, songwriter, contributor, and then reformed, maybe not as the Doors, but as a whole new band, and tried that. But that's hindsight. That's my opinion. I really hate ragging this album out, because the Doors with Morrison created music that still resonates with me and has my entire life, and had an incredible impact on me as a teenager. And they created music unlike anything anybody else was doing at the time or has ever done. And it's really sad that it came to this. But anyway, yeah, that's it. So.
Final thoughts, D?
Again, it was kind of a ballsy move to release this record so soon after LA Woman and Morrison's passing. But yeah, I think like maybe you said earlier, they were trying to ride that wave of popularity, take advantage of it. But yeah, it's kind of a forgettable album easily, and not one song off of Full Circle or Other Voices has been on any other compilation or anything else that I know of. And I don't know if it was the record company or the three other Doors themselves said, "Nah, we don't want to include that on anything else," because I just think there was too much of a disconnect. Without Morrison, they lost their kin.
They did pretty much ignore this stuff for a long time. And I think probably in the 90s or so, found enough of a pressure from consumer demand to re-release these things in the CD era. And but anyway, we can speculate forever and ever and ever. We don't know what was going on in their heads, and it's and I you kind of hate to have to second guess these kind of decisions, and and it was difficult times for them. I understand how it's I mean, these are still 3 pretty young guys who are just who are just trying to figure out what their future's going to be, and so you can't really blame them for making bad decisions, because it's it happens. It's just the way humans work, right? But as outsiders looking in and forming our own opinions, as fans and listeners have every right to do, well, that's what we're doing. Yeah, it's really kind of sad. So, well, anyway, I think we've gone as far as we can go with this. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and join us again on Friday for another review coming up. We'll be back next Tuesday with a roundtable. And thanks for listening, everybody. So long.
All right, take care.